I was grading papers in my favorite corner cafe when I noticed a little girl desperately trying to get her mother's attention. The child was using sign language, her small hands moving with urgent, frustrated gestures, but her mother was completely absorbed in her phone, occasionally making clumsy, hesitant signs back without even looking up. When I saw the tears forming in the little girl's eyes, I knew I had to do something. Before we begin, I'd love to know, have you ever learned a skill thinking you'd never use it, only to discover it was exactly what someone needed? Share your experience in the comments below. And please subscribe for more beautiful stories. Now, let me take you back to that autumn afternoon. I've always believed that good teachers prepare for every possibility, which is why I spent 2 years learning American Sign Language, even though I'd never had a deaf student in my classroom. I figured it was better to be ready and not need it than to need it and not be ready. Little did I know that my preparation would matter most not in a classroom, but in a busy cafe on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my usual spot at Grind Coffee, a cozy place near the school where I often went to grade papers and plan lessons. It was around 3:30 p.m., that quiet lull between the lunch rush and the evening crowd, when the cafe was mostly empty except for a few laptop-wielding freelancers and the occasional parent picking up an afternoon caffeine fix. That's when I noticed them. A woman in an expensive business suit was sitting at a table near the window, completely engrossed in what appeared to be an important phone call. She was speaking in the clipped, professional tone of someone handling a crisis, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad while balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder. Across from her sat a little girl, probably around 7 years old, with curly brown hair and bright, intelligent eyes. She was trying to get her mother's attention, her small hands moving in what I immediately recognized as American Sign Language, but her signs were being largely ignored. I watched as the little girl signed what appeared to be, "Mommy, look," over and over again, pointing excitedly at a drawing she'd made on a napkin. When that didn't work, she tried tapping gently on her mother's arm, only to have the woman hold up one finger in the universal "just a minute" gesture without even glancing away from her phone. The child's frustration was palpable. Her signs became more urgent, more desperate. She was clearly trying to share something important with her mother, but the woman was completely absorbed in her business call, occasionally making what looked like very basic, hesitant signs back without really paying attention. I could see tears starting to form in the little girl's eyes, and my heart broke for her. I knew that feeling of being ignored, of having something important to share, but no one willing to listen. But for this child, the barrier wasn't just inattention, it was communication itself. I found myself studying the mother's signing more closely. Her movements were awkward, uncertain, like someone who had learned the basics but never achieved fluency. She was clearly trying, but her signs were slow and often incorrect, and she wasn't maintaining the eye contact that's so crucial in ASL communication. The little girl tried one more time, signing something that looked like, "Please, Mommy, see my picture." But her mother just held up that finger again, still deep in her phone conversation about quarterly reports and client meetings. That's when I made a decision that would change my life. I closed my laptop, gathered my papers, and walked over to their table. The little girl looked up at me with curious, slightly wary eyes as I knelt down to her level. "Hello," I signed, making sure to maintain eye contact and use clear, deliberate movements. "My name is Derek. What's your name?" The transformation in the child's face was immediate and breathtaking. Her eyes lit up with surprise and delight, and a huge smile spread across her features. "My name is Piper," she signed back, her movements suddenly animated and joyful. "You can talk with your hands?" "I can," I confirmed, smiling back at her. "I learned because I'm a teacher, and I wanted to be ready in case I ever had a student who used sign language." "I use sign language," she signed enthusiastically, "but Mommy is still learning. She tries, but it's hard for her." I glanced up at the mother, who was still on her phone call, completely unaware that her daughter was having her first fluent conversation with a stranger. "What did you want to show your mommy?" I asked Piper. Her face lit up again, and she eagerly held up the napkin she'd been drawing on. It was a picture of what appeared to be a family, a tall woman, a smaller girl, and interestingly, a man figure that she'd added. "I drew our family," she signed, "but I added a daddy because I don't have one, and I think it would be nice." The innocence and honesty of her statement hit me like a punch to the chest. Here was this beautiful, intelligent little girl who was not only dealing with the communication barriers of being deaf in a hearing world, but also navigating the complexities of a single-parent household. "That's a beautiful drawing," I told her. "You're a very good artist." "Thank you," she signed, beaming with pride. "Do you want to see my doll? Her name is Rainbow because she has rainbow hair." For the next 10 minutes, Piper and I had the most delightful conversation. She told me about her doll, her favorite colors, her pet goldfish named Bubbles, and her love of drawing. She was bright, funny, and incredibly articulate in ASL. Her personality shone through every gesture, every facial expression, every animated movement of her hands. I learned that she was 7 years old, that she went to a special school for deaf children, that her favorite subject was art, and that she loved pizza but hated broccoli. She was, in every way, a typical 7-year-old girl, except that she was communicating in a language her own mother struggled to understand. "You're really good at talking with hands," Piper told me. "Better than Mommy. She gets confused sometimes." Learning sign language is hard for some people, but I can tell your mommy loves you very much and is trying her best. I know she loves me, but sometimes I wish she could talk to me like you do. It makes me feel happy inside. The simple honesty of her statement broke my heart. This little girl just wanted to communicate freely with her mother, to share her thoughts and feelings and daily experiences without the barrier of limited sign language skills. It was at that moment that the mother finally ended her phone call and looked up to see me kneeling beside her daughter, deep in animated conversation conducted entirely in sign language. The woman's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of suspicion or anger at finding a stranger talking to her child, her face showed something that looked like wonder. She watched for a moment as Piper and I continued our conversation, her eyes taking in the fluid movements of our hands, the bright expression on her daughter's face, the easy back and forth of our communication. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft and slightly uncertain. "I'm sorry, but are you talking to my daughter?" I stood up, suddenly aware that I might have overstepped some boundaries. "I'm sorry. I hope you don't mind. I noticed that she was trying to get your attention, and I know sign language, so I thought I'd say hello." The woman looked at her daughter, who was practically glowing with happiness, then back at me. "You know sign language?" "I do. I'm a high school teacher, and I learned it in case I ever had deaf students in my classes." "And do you have deaf students, I mean?" "Actually, no. I've never had the opportunity to use it in my classroom, but I'm glad I learned it." The woman was quiet for a moment, studying my face with an intensity that made me slightly uncomfortable. Then she said something that completely surprised me. "Could you teach me?" "I'm sorry?" "Could you teach me sign language?" she repeated, her voice carrying a note of desperation that I hadn't expected. "I've been trying to learn for years, ever since Piper was diagnosed with hearing loss when she was 2. I've taken classes, hired tutors, watched videos, but I can't seem to get it right." She gestured toward her daughter, who was practically glowing with happiness, then back at me. "I've never seen her light up the way she did when you started talking to her. She was laughing and animated and just herself. I realized I've never been able to give her that kind of conversation." The vulnerability in her voice was unmistakable. This was a successful woman. I could tell from her expensive suit, her confident phone manner, her general air of competence. But when it came to communicating with her own daughter, she felt like a failure. "I'm sure you're doing better than you think," I said gently. "Learning ASL as an adult is incredibly challenging." "No, you don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "I can barely manage basic signs. I can ask her if she's hungry or tired. I can tell her I love her, but I can't have real conversations with her. I can't ask her about her day at school, or her dreams, or her feelings. I can't tell her stories or share jokes or just talk." She looked at her daughter again, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "She's 7 years old, and I feel like I barely know her because we can't really communicate. And watching you two just now, seeing how happy she was, how animated and free, it made me realize what I've been missing." I felt a deep sympathy for this woman. She was clearly a loving mother who was struggling with something that was completely outside her area of expertise. The frustration and guilt she was feeling were written all over her face. "What's your name?" I asked. "Sloan. Sloan Morrison. And this is Piper." "I'm Derek Matthews. And yes, I'd be happy to help you learn sign language." The relief that washed over Sloan's face was immediate and profound. "Really? You would do that?" "Of course. But can I ask you something first?" "Anything. What do you do for work? I noticed you seemed to be handling some kind of business crisis on that phone call." Sloan looked slightly embarrassed. "I run a marketing consulting firm. We're in the middle of a major campaign launch, and there was a problem with one of our clients. I know I shouldn't have taken the call while I was with Piper, but..." "But you're a single mom, trying to balance everything," I finished for her. "Exactly. And I'm not doing a very good job of it, apparently." I looked at Piper, who was now arranging her toys in a careful pattern on the table, completely absorbed in her play, but occasionally glancing up at us with curious eyes. "Can I tell you something?" I said to Sloan. "In the 10 minutes I spent talking with Piper, I learned that she's incredibly bright, funny, creative, and well-adjusted. She talks about you with obvious love and admiration. Whatever you're doing as a mother, you're doing a lot of things right." Sloan's eyes filled with tears again. "But the communication is something we can work on. It's never too late to learn, and it's never too late to build that connection with your daughter." "When could we start?" she asked eagerly. "How about this weekend? We could meet here or at a park, somewhere Piper would be comfortable. I could start with some basic conversational signs, and we could practice together." "That would be amazing," Sloan said. "But I should warn you, I am a terrible student. I've had 3 different tutors give up on me." "Maybe you just needed the right motivation," I said, glancing at Piper, "and the right teacher." That Saturday, I met Sloan and Piper at a small park near the café. I'd spent the week preparing a basic curriculum, focusing on conversational signs that would allow Sloan to connect with her daughter on a deeper level. What I discovered was that Sloan wasn't a terrible student at all. She was just an anxious one. Years of struggling with ASL had created a mental block that made her second-guess every movement, every gesture. She was so afraid of making mistakes that she couldn't relax enough to let the language flow naturally. The key to sign language, I explained as we sat on a park bench while Piper played on the swings, is not perfection. It's communication. Piper doesn't need you to sign perfectly. She needs you to sign with confidence. But what if I say the wrong thing? What if I accidentally sign something offensive or confusing? Then you'll laugh about it together and try again. Piper is 7 years old. She's not going to judge you for making mistakes. She's just going to be thrilled that you're trying to talk to her. We started with simple conversational phrases like, "How was your day? What did you learn at school? Tell me about your drawing." I showed Sloan how to use facial expressions and body language to convey emotion, how to maintain eye contact, how to create the visual connection that's so crucial in ASL. But the real breakthrough came when I suggested that Sloan stop thinking of sign language as a foreign language she was trying to learn and start thinking of it as her daughter's native language that she was trying to join. Piper isn't deaf. She's deaf with a capital D. It's not a disability, it's a culture, a community, a way of experiencing the world. When you learn ASL, you're not just learning to communicate with your daughter, you're learning to enter her world.
That shift in perspective changed everything for Sloane. Instead of approaching sign language as a challenge to overcome, she began approaching it as a bridge to build. Over the next few weeks, we met regularly, sometimes at the park, sometimes at the café, sometimes at Sloane's house. I watched as mother and daughter began to connect in ways they never had before. Sloane's signing improved dramatically, but more importantly, her confidence grew. The first time I saw Sloane and Piper have a real conversation about Piper's day at school, complete with jokes and laughter and animated storytelling, I felt a sense of accomplishment that surpassed anything I had ever experienced in my teaching career.
Look at them, I thought to myself as I watched from across Sloane's living room. Look at what's possible when people can really communicate. But something else was happening too, something I hadn't expected. As I spent more time with Sloane and Piper, I found myself becoming attached to them in ways that went beyond teacher and student. Piper began to feel like the daughter I'd never had, and Sloane was becoming something I couldn't quite define. She was brilliant, driven, and successful in her career, but also vulnerable and caring when it came to her daughter. She worked incredibly hard to master ASL, practicing for hours every night after Piper went to bed. She asked thoughtful questions about deaf culture and made genuine efforts to understand her daughter's world. And she was beautiful. Not just physically, though she certainly was that, but beautiful in the way she loved her daughter, in her determination to be better, in her willingness to be vulnerable and ask for help. I found myself looking forward to our lessons, not just because I enjoyed teaching, but because I enjoyed spending time with both of them. It was Piper who brought it up first. "Derek," she signed to me one afternoon while Sloane was in the kitchen making snacks, "are you going to be my daddy?" The question caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mommy is happier when you're here, and you make me happy too. And you can talk to me like Mommy is learning to do, so I thought maybe you could be my daddy." I felt my heart skip a beat. "Piper, that's not really how it works. You're my friend, and you're Mommy's friend, but you love us, right? I can tell, and we love you too." Out of the mouths of babes, this 7-year-old had seen something that I'd been afraid to acknowledge even to myself. "Yes," I admitted, "I do love you both." "Then why can't you be my daddy?" It was a fair question, and one I didn't have a good answer for. Why couldn't I be her father figure? Why couldn't I be part of this family that had come to mean so much to me? That evening, after Piper had gone to bed, Sloane and I sat on her back porch practicing some advanced conversational signs, but my mind kept drifting back to Piper's question. "You seem distracted tonight," Sloane observed, switching to spoken English, as we often did when Piper wasn't around. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure how to bring up what Piper asked me. "Sloane, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "What happened to Piper's father? You don't have to answer if it's too personal, but she mentioned that she doesn't have a dad, and I was just curious." Sloane was quiet for a moment, looking out at her small backyard where Piper's toys were scattered across the grass. "He left when Piper was diagnosed with hearing loss. He said he couldn't handle having a defective child." The word hit me like a slap. "Defective?" "His word, not mine," Sloane said quickly. "I threw him out that same day. Piper isn't defective. She's perfect, exactly as she is, but he couldn't see that." "I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was, but honestly, it was also a relief. If he couldn't love Piper unconditionally, then he didn't deserve to be her father." She turned to me. "Why do you ask?" I took a deep breath. "Piper asked me today if I was going to be her daddy." Sloane's eyes widened. Oh. What did you tell her?
I told her it doesn't work that way, that I'm your friend and her friend, but I paused, gathering my courage. But the truth is, Sloane, I've been thinking about it too. Thinking about what? About being more than just your sign language teacher. The silence stretched between us, and I immediately regretted saying anything. I'd overstepped, misread the situation, assumed feelings that weren't there. Derek, Sloane said softly, I need to tell you something. My heart sank. Here it came, the gentle letdown, the explanation of why this could never work. I've been thinking about it too, and my head snapped up in surprise. About how happy you make me feel, how I feel butterflies in my stomach every time we meet. And I've been thinking about what it would mean for me to have a partner who sees my daughter the way you do, not as a challenge to overcome, but as a gift to celebrate. I felt my heart start to race. Sloane. I'm scared, she admitted. I've been on my own with Piper for 5 years. I've built our life around just the two of us, and letting someone else in, it's terrifying. I understand. And I don't want to pressure you or rush anything, but I need you to know that I care about both of you more than I've cared about anyone. Even though we come as a package deal, even though dating me means taking on the responsibility of a deaf child? Sloane, I said, reaching for her hand, Piper isn't a responsibility I'd be taking on. She's a privilege I'd be honored to have. And her being deaf isn't something I'd have to deal with. It's part of who she is, and I love who she is. Tears were streaming down Sloane's face now, but she was also smiling. Derek, I think I'm falling in love with you. I think I'm falling in love with you, too. We sat there on her back porch, holding hands and talking about what this might mean, what it might look like, how we could build something together that honored the family Sloane and Piper had already created, while making room for me to be part of it. We'd have to take it slow, Sloane said, for Piper's sake. She's been through enough changes in her life. Of course, we can take as much time as you need. And you'd have to understand that Piper comes first, always. I wouldn't want it any other way. And you'd have to be okay with the fact that our life might look different from other families. Piper's deafness affects everything, where we go, how we communicate, the schools she attends, the activities she can participate in. Sloane, I said, squeezing her hand, Piper's deafness isn't something I see that limits our family. I see it as something that makes our family unique and special. 6 months later, I moved in with Sloane and Piper. It wasn't a decision we made lightly. We'd spent months talking about it, planning for it, making sure Piper was comfortable with the idea. But when the day finally came, it felt like the most natural thing in the world.
Piper helped me unpack my boxes, chattering excitedly in sign language about how we could rearrange the furniture and where I should put my books. She'd started calling me Daddy Derek, a compromise that acknowledged both my role in her life and the fact that I wasn't trying to replace her biological father. Are you happy? She asked me as we set up my desk in the corner of the living room. I'm very happy, I signed back. Are you happy? The happiest, she confirmed. Now our family is complete. And she was right. Our family was complete, but not in the way I'd ever imagined. We were a hearing man, a hearing woman, and a deaf child, communicating in a mixture of spoken English and American Sign Language, navigating a world that wasn't always designed for families like ours. But we were also something more. We were proof that families can be built on love and understanding rather than just biology. We were proof that communication is about more than just speaking the same language. It's about making the effort to enter each other's worlds. Sloane's ASL continued to improve dramatically. Within a year, she was having complex, nuanced conversations with Piper about everything from school drama to philosophical questions about the nature of friendship. The transformation in their relationship was remarkable to witness. I feel like I'm finally getting to know my daughter, Sloane told me one evening as we watched Piper practice a presentation for school. All these years, I thought I knew her, but I was only seeing the surface. Now that we can really communicate, I'm discovering this whole other person, this brilliant, thoughtful, hilarious person who's been there all along. I started volunteering at Piper School, helping with their drama program and teaching some of the hearing staff basic ASL. It was incredibly fulfilling to use my skills in a way that made a real difference in children's lives. But the most meaningful moment came a year and a half after that first day in the café when Piper came home from school with an assignment to write about her family. "I need help," she signed to us that evening. "I have to write about my family, but I don't know how to explain us." "What do you mean?" Sloane asked. "Well, most kids have a mommy and daddy who are married and have been together since before they were born. But we're different. Daddy Derek isn't my real daddy, but he's more real than my birth daddy ever was. And Mommy, you learned sign language for me, which most hearing mommies don't do. And we all talk with our hands, which most families don't do." Sloane and I exchanged a look. We'd always been honest with Piper about our family structure, but we'd never really talked about how it might feel different from other families. "Do you feel bad about being different?" I asked her. Piper considered this seriously. "No," she said finally. "I feel special. Most kids only have one language in their family, but we have two. Most kids have parents who were together before they were born, but I got to help choose my daddy." She paused, then continued. "I think I'll write about how families don't have to look the same to be real. I'll write about how love is what makes a family, not just being born into one." As I watched this 8-year-old articulate something so profound about the nature of family and love, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought us together.
It had started with a simple observation in a café, a moment when I saw a child who needed someone to understand her, but it had become so much more than that. It had become a lesson in the power of communication, the importance of entering each other's worlds, and the beautiful ways that families can be built on choice and love rather than just circumstance. Today, 3 years after that first meeting in the café, our family continues to grow and evolve. Sloane and I got married last spring in a ceremony conducted entirely in ASL, with Piper serving as our ring bearer. Piper is now 10 years old and thriving in every way. She's confident, articulate, and proud of her deaf identity. Sloane has become fluent enough in ASL to interpret for other parents at school events, and she's started a support group for hearing parents of deaf children. She uses her business skills to advocate for better accessibility and inclusion in our community. And me? I finally got to use my ASL skills in my classroom when I had my first deaf student last year. But more importantly, I learned that sometimes the most important lessons we teach and learn happen outside the classroom, in the quiet moments when we choose to see each other, really see each other, and make the effort to connect across whatever barriers might exist. The little girl I met in that cafe taught me that communication is about more than just words. It's about presence, attention, and the willingness to enter someone else's world. Her mother taught me that it's never too late to learn, to grow, to become the person your loved ones need you to be. And together, they taught me that families aren't just born, they're built, one conversation at a time, one sign at a time, one moment of understanding at a time. An absolutely beautiful story about the power of communication, the importance of inclusion, and how families can be built on love and understanding. What do you think of Derek's decision to step in and help when he saw Piper struggling to communicate with her mother? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were touched by this heartwarming story about breaking down communication barriers and building unexpected families, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more inspiring stories that celebrate human connection. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.